The movie begins in Sicily, Italy. Crime lord Lorenzo Vitali is returning home with his grandson. As they approach the mansion, the shocking sight of all their armed guards brutally killed greets them. Lorenzo grabs his gun and warns his grandson to stay inside before he is greeted by a nervous guard, who says he was ordered to keep watch outside. The young guard leads Lorenzo through the house, where more guards lay dead in gruesome ways with blood covering the entire house. They head down to the basement where two other armed guards are holding Robert McCall at gunpoint, who calmly explains that Lorenzo's guards did not let him in when he asked nicely. Lorenzo cannot believe the balls on this guy to come to his house and wonders why he did all this, and Robert explains that Lorenzo took something that does not belong to him and he came to collect it. Lorenzo thinks he is safe, but Robert explains that both his armed guards are already dead and he has 9 seconds to comply. Suddenly, Robert swiftly takes out the guards before shooting Lorenzo. As he tries to crawl away, Robert shoots him in the ass with a shotgun. Lorenzo weakly crawls over to a wall and Robert blows his face off before snatching the key to his vault. Robert encounters Lorenzo's grandson outside, warning him to stay in the truck and he will be safe. As he turns to leave, he is suddenly shot in the back and turns to see Lorenzo's grandson drop a rifle and run away. Realizing that his injury will be fatal, Robert tries to off himself but he has run out of bullets. Robert does what he can to sustain himself and takes the ferry back to the mainland. While driving along the coast, he passes out and is found by a passing motorist named Gio Bonacci. Gio brings him to a remote coastal town where Robert is operated on and treated by a doctor named Enzo Orizio. After the surgery, Robert wakes and tries to leave, but Enzo convinces him to rest if he wishes to heal. After a few days, Robert is able to use a cane and goes for a walk through the small town where the locals stare at him. He manages to evade a police checkpoint and sits at a local cafe. He orders a tea bag, but one waitress instead brings him a cappuccino, telling him that tea is for old ladies and Englishmen. Robert concedes and is having the cup before he is approached by Gio, who turns out to be Italian military. He introduces his daughter Gabby before sending her off and taking a seat. He refuses to confront Robert about what happened, calling his accident a fall. He tells Robert that the town is filled with good people and hands over Robert's car key, reassuring Robert that he did not go through his bags. Robert smiles to himself, appreciating the kind gesture, and Gabby even returns and leaves cookies with him. Robert anonymously calls into the CIA financial group and tips off an agent about Lorenzo's stolen money, which he recovered and left waiting for the CIA to find. Later, Robert is sitting in a cafe when he spots a young man come in and collect an envelope from the owner, but he ignores it. The next day, Robert is passing by a local fish shop where members of the Camorra mafia are posted outside. Inside, Marco, a high-ranking Camorra member, is pressuring the owner to hand over the cash he owes. The owner, Angelo, begs for leniency, but Marco begins to brutally beat him, which Robert overhears. He watches as Marco and his goons get on their bikes and warn the owner to pay up while giving them the coldest stare in the world. Marco and his goons return to Naples, Italy, where Marco asks to see his older brother Vincent, head of the Camorra. Upstairs, Vincent is trying to get people to sign over their building so he can build a hotel, but a few occupants deny him and Vincent simply walks away. He comes down to speak with Marco, where all the tenants of the building are being forced out. Vincent scolds Marco about bringing too much attention to his activities when just then, the elderly father of the tenants who refuse to leave is thrown out the window with a rope around his neck. Vincent coldly orders his men to leave the old man hanging so others can see he means business. Robert and Enzo are having dinner when Enzo plans to go to the market tomorrow to buy fish, but Robert insists that he go on his behalf. He heads over to Angelo's shop where he again encounters the waitress from the cafe, Amina, who tells him how to identify fresh fish and compliments his hat, intriguing Robert. He insists that he pays for the fish, but Angelo refuses, saying that Robert has become like a friend to him. Based on Robert's earlier anonymous call, CIA officers Emma and Frank arrive at Lorenzo's mansion where they uncover a ton load of illegal drugs and $11 million. They have scrubbed the scene, but along with the multiple dead bodies, they have been only able to recover one set of prints with no match. Frank is baffled, as the CIA had no idea about the massive operations taking place, and Emma is left to figure out who their anonymous caller could be. Later, Enzo checks Robert's wound and sees that he is healing well. Robert asks him why he helped him without asking any questions or calling the authorities, but Enzo tells him that he is a good person, which weighs on Robert's mind. Vincent meets with Marco, and tells him that they will step up their pressure on the people in town, as he wishes to build casinos and hotels and need the residents gone, implying to Marco that he knows what needs to be done. In a few days, Robert is well and has packed his belongings to leave, but soon the entire town is thrown into chaos as Angelo's shop has been set on fire, leaving him hysterical as his entire life burns before him. Robert watches from a distance, heartbroken at the sight of Angelo and the people he has grown to love. He turns to see Marco and his goons a distance off and instantly knows what happened. Robert decides to stay and help the residents rebuild. Gio has gotten his hands on video footage of the arson and begins investigating by tracking down the van. That night, Robert is at the cafe folding his napkins as usual when Amina sees him and wonders about his peculiar habits. She begins to ask him about the meals he has in America and offers to show Robert the real cuisine of her country, under the condition that he wears the hat that she likes. Amina takes Robert to a local buffet-style dinner where the residents gather and eat together. The next day, Robert is having tea when he notices a woman sneakily taking photos of him and confronts her. It turns out to be Emma, whom he recognizes, and tells her she's welcome for the tip-off. She wonders who he is and who he works for, but Robert avoids her question and instead tells her to not be so obvious. She asks him about the bodies at the mansion and if he killed the men, but Robert again avoids the question. Emma is determined to find out who he is, and Robert tells her that she may be surprised by what she finds. Later, Gio goes to pick up Gabby from school, but gets a call from a man saying that they took his daughter, causing Gio to sprint off to get help. He runs back home, but is greeted by the sight of Vincent's men in his house, holding his wife Chiara and Gabby hostage. Marco begins to brutally beat Gio, telling him not to make trouble for them. Marco holds a gun to Gabby, warning Gio that if he continues digging, his family will be next. Gio gets treated by Enzo, but tries to avoid speaking to Robert. Robert asks Enzo, who simply replies that he fell, making Robert realize that something is wrong. Enzo tells Robert about the Camorra, and fears that he may lose his town as he sees them as a cancer, which has no cure. Robert makes his way to the church, but encounters Emma there. She tells him that apparently he is a ghost as she can find nothing on him and tells him he is off the hook for now, since his call led to a major find. Robert reveals that he purposely contacted Emma and allowed her to find him, which intrigues Emma. A few nights later, Gio is having dinner with his family when Marco and his men enter. Marco takes a seat and demands that Gio get them some boats for their operations, but he soon feels the cold stare of Robert. Not liking the stare, Gio goes over to Robert and warns him to mind his own business. Robert calmly tells him that he really likes the place and the people, and practically begs Marco to take his business elsewhere. Marco and his men laugh in his face, so Robert grabs his arm and pinches a nerve, causing Marco a lot of pain, and forcing him to send his goons out. Robert makes him disarm himself before allowing him to exit, leaving his pride on the floor and the people in shock. Marco meets up with two of his goons outside, worked up and swearing to kill Robert for meddling in his business. As he plans his attack, a van suddenly isekais one goon, where he's probably reincarnated as a slime or something. Inside the van is another dead Camorra member, and using the distraction, Robert knocks out the third goon. Marco pulls a knife, but with a smile, Robert breaks his arm before forcing him to stab himself, staring into his eyes as he dies, and simply disappearing. Later, there is a massive bombing in Rome, which Frank and Emma discover that money from the drugs were being used to fund terrorist activities in other countries and begin to gather intelligence leading them back to the Camorra. Emma approaches the head of Italian police, which requests to interview certain members of the Camorra, but the chief throws out one file refusing to allow the interview. Emma, however, is able to grab the man and bring him to a black site where she gets info from him about gang operations, resulting in the CIA and Italian police to launch raids on Vincent's operations. At the funeral for Marco, the chief of police turns up and goes to speak with Vincent directly. He tells Vincent that the CIA is onto him and he needs to shut down his operations. He warns about Emma and how they have intelligence that is buying drugs from terrorists funded their bombing in Rome. Vincent isn't worried, telling the chief he does not care about the bombings and he will take care of Emma in his own way. The chief gets offended when Vincent tells him to remember his place and makes the mistake of calling Vincent a barbarian to his face. Vincent's men stop him from leaving and hold him, while another man brutally cuts off his hand. They escort him to a car to be taken to the hospital, not before Vincent reminds him to do what he is paid to do. Emma gets news of the chief's attack and is told that she will be escorted to the hospital to speak with him, but just then McCall gives her a call, warning her that the Camorra have information on her. The call stops Emma long enough to avoid a massive car explosion meant to kill her. That night, Vincent and his men kidnap Gio and take him to the town center, threatening to kill him unless his brother's killer shows himself. The people in the town all come out to stare at the sight. Vincent shoots off Gio's ear, and threatens to put one in his head when suddenly Robert calls out to him to stop. Robert shows himself dual-wielding two pistols, telling Vincent that he finally found peace in this town and he will not allow Vincent to take it away. Robert steps forward and surrenders, telling them to take him instead of the town. Vincent prepares to shoot Robert, but Enzo fires off a shot and aims his gun at the man holding Gio's wife. The townspeople begin to record the spectacle, forcing Vincent to back down. He tells Robert that he will come back and tear the entire town apart, and Robert tells him to bring it, as he will be here waiting. That night, Vincent and his men are gathered for a meal, having gathered no intel on Robert so far. Vincent promises that the following night he and his men will kill Robert and take over the town. Early the following night, one of Vincent's guards hears a car alarm go off and goes to check but sees no one. As he is distracted, Robert kills him silently. Another guard is shot to death before the lights to the entire compound goes out, and 3 guards are shot in the head in quick succession. The guard watching the cameras gets a fire poker through the throat. Like a ghost, Robert moves through the house taking out the men without raising an alarm. Vincent is asleep in bed when he is awakened by blood dripping from the ceiling. Suddenly his glass roof busts open and one of his guards is hung upside down like a piñata. Vincent frantically grabs his gun yelling for his guards but hears no one. He comes out to check where he is greeted by the bodies of his men. He begins to see Robert's shadow move across the room and begins to fire wildly until Robert knocks him out. He wakes up tied by the neck to a post. Robert tells him that he stuffed a bag of pills down his stomach and he has about a minute before he overdoses. He cuts Vincent free, who begins to stagger across the room gasping for air. Robert calmly walks behind him as he staggers through the streets of the city. He is hit by a car and finally collapses in the street dead. Robert stares him over before disappearing into the night. Robert then goes to see Emma, who has been admitted in the hospital. Robert explains that all this started because someone he knows pension fund got hacked and he wanted to help, which led him to Lorenzo, then the Camorra and Vincent. He leaves Emma a bag of cash to be delivered to his friend. Emma brings the cash to the old couple who was planning to leave their home, and the couple break down in tears, thanking the stranger that helped them. Robert then settles down in the town and stays among the people. Remember to subscribe and turn on notifications, so you can watch more movies like this. Thanks for watching.